It was 1944. Europe was burning. The Nazis had ruled the continent for 5 years, their grip so tight that hope itself seemed like treason. But somewhere in neutral Spain, in a small apartment filled with cigarette smoke and coded radio messages, one man was quietly rewriting the war. He wasn't a soldier, he wasn't a general. He was a liar, the most extraordinary liar in history. His codename was Garbo. And he was about to fool Adolf Hitler himself. Twice, Juan Pujol García was an unlikely hero. He wasn't trained by any government, didn't belong to any army, and had no ties to the intelligence world. Before the war, he'd failed at almost everything he tried: business, farming, even managing a cinema. But beneath his gentle manners and unassuming face burned a hatred for fascism. He watched as his homeland, Spain, was torn apart by dictatorship and violence, and he swore that one day he'd strike back, not with a gun, but with his mind. No one could have imagined just how far that promise would go. When war erupted in 1939, Pujol made a decision that would change history. He wanted to spy for the British. He approached MI6 with an offer to infiltrate the Nazi network and report back. But the British turned him down flat. 3 times. They thought he was a joke. Just another dreamer trying to play James Bond before James Bond existed. But Pujol didn't give up. He decided that if the British wouldn't make him a spy, he'd just become one on his own. So using only a stolen passport and his imagination, he created a fake identity, a pro-German Spanish official with connections in London. Then he approached the Nazis, offering to spy for them. The Germans accepted instantly, believing they'd found a loyal agent in the heart of Britain. In reality, Pujol had never even set foot in England. He was living in Lisbon, Portugal, surrounded by newspapers, a typewriter, and pure nerve. The perfect recipe for the biggest con of the war. Pujol began sending detailed intelligence reports to Berlin, all completely fake. He copied troop names, street addresses, and coded terms from British newspapers, weaving them into believable reports. To make his lies more realistic, he even included minor, true details, the kind that spies often stumble upon by accident. The Germans lapped it up, convinced they'd found a priceless informant, and that's how a man with no access to British secrets became one of Hitler's most trusted spies. Over time, Pujol's operation grew into something far bigger. He invented an entire network of imaginary subagents, pilots, soldiers, couriers, even secretaries, each with their own story, personality, and background. There was a Welsh nationalist, a Dutch seaman, even a lover working inside the Ministry of Information. Pujol wrote letters between them, faked arguments, and invented their salaries. Berlin was paying for dozens of spies who didn't exist, and they never realized it. When the British finally caught wind of what this self-made spy had accomplished, they were stunned. MI5 immediately brought him to London. There they gave him the codename Garbo, after the actress Greta Garbo, because, like her, he was the ultimate performer. Under British supervision, Garbo's imaginary network expanded to over 27 agents. Together, they would feed Hitler one carefully designed illusion after another, a storm of lies so convincing it could alter the course of the war. And, soon, it did. In 1944, the Allies were preparing for the biggest invasion in human history, D-Day. But success depended on one thing: deception. The Germans had to believe the invasion would strike anywhere but Normandy. The Allies launched a massive disinformation campaign called Operation Fortitude, and at its heart stood Garbo. His mission: to convince the Nazis that the real invasion would happen at Pas de Calais, hundreds of miles from the truth. The fate of millions depended on whether one man's lies could outweigh Hitler's paranoia. Garbo and his MI5 handlers began sending hundreds of coded messages to the Abwehr, Each one contained precise, believable intel. Fake troop movements, false shipping schedules, and convincing reports about weather and logistics. He built entire narratives around fictional soldiers, even reporting one of his agents died on duty, and then wrote letters from his widow, grieving and bitter. The Germans were emotionally invested in people who had never existed. That's when MI5 knew the illusion was complete. By early 1944, Garbo was one of Hitler's most valued spies. The Nazis even promoted him. They trusted him so completely that they stopped verifying his reports. One German commander wrote, "Agent Arabelle is beyond suspicion." And to seal the irony, Hitler himself awarded Garbo the Iron Cross, one of Nazi Germany's highest military honors. The Führer had just decorated a man working for the enemy. Then came the 6th of June, 1944. The night before D-Day, Garbo sent a carefully timed message to Berlin. He warned them that Allied forces were preparing to attack, but delayed it just enough that his message arrived after the invasion had begun. To the Germans, it looked genuine. To the Allies, it was perfect. Hitler believed Garbo's story completely, that Normandy was just a diversion, and the real invasion was still coming at Calais. So, he held his best panzer divisions in reserve, waiting for an attack that would never come. That hesitation saved tens of thousands of Allied lives. By the time Hitler realized his mistake, the Allies had secured a beachhead, broken through enemy lines, and begun marching toward Paris. Garbo's deception had done what no army could. It blinded the Nazi war machine long enough for the Allies to strike. The invasion of Normandy and the liberation of Europe succeeded because one man could lie better than anyone else alive. But after victory came silence. Garbo knew too much, and his fame could have made him a target. So, in 1949, he staged one final act, his own death. Officially, Juan Pujol García died of malaria in Angola. In reality, he fled to Venezuela, where he opened a small bookstore and lived under a new name. Even in peace, he couldn't resist the comfort of a lie. For decades, no one knew he was alive. Not even the British who'd once controlled him. Then, in 1984, 40 years after D-Day, a historian tracked him down. He was living quietly, surrounded by books and memories. When asked why he'd risked everything, Garbo simply smiled and said, "I wanted to make my contribution to peace, no matter the cost." When the truth of his double life came out, Britain invited him back. He stood at the D-Day anniversary ceremonies in Normandy, gazing at the beaches his lies had once saved. The soldiers who had lived because of him never knew his name. But he didn't need fame. He had already fooled history itself. Garbo's story is more than espionage. It's a parable about the power of human imagination. In a war fought with tanks, planes, and blood, it was words and deception that turned the tide. One man, with no army, no gun, and no orders, had shaped the fate of the world. And in the end, the most invisible man of World War II became its most powerful ghost. Stay tuned, because next, we uncover another story from the shadows. A plan so secret, so bizarre, that it blurred the line between science and madness. A mission known only as Operation Bodyguard, the grand illusion behind D-Day itself.